You see how it was done. The prohibition not to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, that was the one sure way of getting it eaten. But of course, when the Lord God confronted Adam and said, "You've been eating from that tree I told you not to eat," he said, "This woman that you gave to me, she tempted me and I did eat." So God turned to Eve, "Now what about it?" And she said, "Well, it was the serpent." Then he looked at the serpent, and the serpent didn't say anything, because he knew too much, and he wasn't about to give away the show. We all know who sits at the right hand of God. That's safe, sanctified territory. But who sits at the left? That's been rather hushed up, because traditionally, that's where the prosecutor sits. That's the seat of the accuser. And in the book of Job, who plays that part? Of course, Satan is the district attorney at the court of heaven. He's the prosecutor, and he's a faithful servant of the court. You see, the whole problem is it would be very bad indeed if God were the author of evil and we were his victims. That is to say, if we keep the model of the king of the universe and the creatures are all subjects of the king, then a God who is responsible for evil is being very unkind to other people. But in this theory, God is not another person. There are no victims of God. He's never anything but his own victim. You are responsible. And if you want to stay in the state of illusion, stay in it. But you can always wake up. In Buddhism, you see, demons are not evil, not in the way people usually think. They are actually beneficent. They appear frightening, yes, but underneath that mask there's something quite different going on. The demon, in many cases, represents change impermanence, the shifting nature of things. And while change seems frightening on the surface, the deeper insight is that it is liberating. Death, for example, is a frightening thing to many, but in reality, death is what gives life its shape. If there were no death, there would be no life. And so, the wise man is not afraid of the demon. He doesn't run. He walks straight toward it to embrace it. And in that moment, the demon transforms. The frightening becomes the profound. What seemed terrible is revealed as necessary. You find the same kind of idea, curiously, in the book of Job. There, Satan appears, not as the enemy of heaven, not as the enemy of mankind, but as a sort of district attorney in the court of God. His job is to see the flaws, to point out the possible weak spots, to question. He's not working against the system, he's part of it. He sees Job and suspects that Job's goodness may not be genuine. So he proposes an investigation, and God permits it. The trials begin. Now, Satan's role here is not to tempt or to destroy, but simply to challenge, to test, to examine. And Job, as the story goes, comes through it. The judgment goes against Satan. Job is shown to be honorable. And notice something odd. Though the prosecutor is a servant of the court, we rarely sympathize with him. In public trials, it's almost always the defense that wins the crowd's heart. The defense, after all, stands at the right hand of the judge, just as Christ is described our only mediator and advocate. So we have the image, Christ as defense, Satan as prosecution. Both part of the court, both part of the process. But there's more to it than that. Because, as in any drama, something was arranged beforehand. Before the curtain went up, so to speak, there was an agreement behind the scenes in the green room, off stage. The roles were given, the challenge is accepted, but the meaning of it all is not revealed until the curtain falls. And only then do you see the whole play. When we were children, we were taught to count on 2, 3, and to recite our ABCs. But long before that, we were taught something far more subtle. As we sat on our mother's knee, watching the world go by, we learned the game of black and white. Now that, you see, was never part of the official curriculum. Because what they didn't teach us in school is that life isn't a battle between opposites, it's a polarity. And that's a crucial distinction. A conflict is where one side tries to destroy the other. A polarity is where the two sides belong to one whole. We often say we're poles apart, especially when we disagree with someone completely. But in saying that, we give the whole game away. Because poles are just the ends of a single magnet. You can't have one without the other. Try cutting the South Pole off a magnet. All you've done is create a new one. You'll never have a North Pole that's just hanging out by itself. It simply can't exist. So these opposites, life and death, self and other, good and evil, being and non-being, they're not enemies. They're partners in the dance. Each one calls the other into existence. And yet most of us are playing the game of pretending we don't know this. That maybe black could win. That the light might really vanish. That the music could stop for good. That there could be a world of only darkness, of only sorrow, but you wouldn't know it was sorrow if that's all there ever was. You see, the black and the white still come together. And the final trick we forget is that self and other do too. You don't exist without all that. Now, once we begin to see that life isn't a conflict but a polarity, that opposites go together the way a magnet has two poles, we find ourselves looking at the whole game of good and evil with fresh eyes. Not as a war, but as a kind of cosmic play. And I want to show you something. You see here this figure. At first glance, it looks like two black faces in profile, nearly touching, as if about to kiss. But if you soften your focus, or pull back just a bit, suddenly you see a white shape between them, a cup, a vase, some sort of chalice. And here's the delightful trick. You can see either the cup or the faces, but not both at once. You may flip rapidly between them, this and that, light and dark, but they won't coexist in your direct awareness. This visual paradox becomes a marvelous metaphor, because this is precisely how we perceive the world. There's a word in Sanskrit, avidya, which means not seeing, or better, ignoring. Not in the sense of stupidity, but in the sense of leaving something out, selective attention. You see the cup only by ignoring the faces, and you see the faces only by ignoring the cup. This, you see, is the nature of duality. Either black is background and white is the form, or white is the ground and black takes shape, but never both in the same breath. Our perception is structured this way. It's mutually exclusive. Our concepts, our categories, are like little pigeonholes that only allow one bird inside at a time. And yet, if you look carefully, both the cup and the faces are always there. The whole figure never changed. You did. Or more precisely, your attention did. Now, when we experience the world, we tend to identify with the subject, the knower, the I that sees, not with the thing seen. But consider, if there's nothing to be seen, what becomes of the seer? If there's no object, what's the point of having a subject? You can't have one without the other, the same way you can't have an inside without an outside. Try drawing a square and ask yourself, where's the inside? Well, it only exists relative to what's not inside. The boundaries define both sides at once. And in Buddhism, this idea that subject and object, light and dark, form and void go together, is called shunyata, often translated as emptiness or void, but it doesn't mean nothingness. It means interdependence. The cup is empty of separate self-existence. It needs the space around it, the background, to be what it is. This is beautifully symbolized in the Taoist diagram of yin and yang, the dark and the light, endlessly circling like two fishes chasing one another's tail. They don't clash, they flow. They don't fight, they balance. They don't destroy, they become one another. Again and again and again. Now we must ask, are these two fishes in battle? Is the white trying to devour the black, and the black retaliating to consume the white? Because if that's what we're witnessing, then life is nothing but a grim fight. A contest where one must win, and the other must lose. That's how we've often interpreted the human situation. Man versus nature, light versus dark, good versus evil. Man, of course, is the white fish. Rational, civilized, clean. Nature, then, is the dark fish. Wild, chaotic, unpredictable. And man's task, we say, is to conquer it, bring light into the darkness, make order reign. But what happens if the white fish actually succeeds? Well, he disappears too. Because the white only exists in contrast to the black. If you eliminate one, the other vanishes. They are not enemies, they're partners. They define each other. And so, if these fishes could awaken, if they could see that they are not two, but one, they would no longer struggle. They would whirl in playful circles, not as combatants, but as dancers. The painful, the difficult, the seemingly evil, all of it, is part of the total picture. You need the dark to see the light as much as you need silence to know sound. And this insight that opposites are not in conflict but in cooperation is what in Zen is called satori, and in Buddhism, body awakening. It is that flash of realization that life is not a battle of yes over no, of good over evil. It is the discovery that yes and no require each other, that the darkness is the backdrop against which the light shines, that what we call evil has its place too, not as something to be excused, but something to be understood. Disorder is necessary for the expression of order. Pain is necessary for the recognition of joy. Death gives meaning to life. And this isn't some philosophical consolation. It's structural. It's the very way things are. And when you really see this, something shifts. Life is no longer a war to be won. It becomes a dance. Not a contest, but a celebration. And so these yin-yang fishes no longer devour one another. They swirl and spin and chase each other like children playing in circle shaving the time of their lives. Now you see, human beings have been playing a very different game, a serious one. We've seen ourselves as separate from nature, and the task of life has become the conquest of chaos. Our science and technology, marvelous as they are, have often viewed nature as the enemy. The forest must be cleared, the rivers dammed, the wilderness tamed, chaos must be turned into clockwork. We take this task very seriously. Our systems of order grow and spread like the branching arms of a fern, extending through control, regulation, conquest. But here's the difference. In Buddhism, this approach, the attempt to make order win, is seen as leaving something out. It forgets that form needs formlessness, that structure needs space, that life needs death. And so we come back to our question. Must we see all the exquisite forms of life as mere mechanisms for survival, as disguises for attack or camouflage, as lures for mating or traps for prey? Or can we see them as a dance? Can we see the plumage of the bird, the patterns of the leaf, the spiral of the galaxy, not as utilitarian, but as joyful expressions of form, as play, as celebration? Or when you shift your view from conflict to polarity, from conquest to dance, you begin to see that life isn't something you have to win, it's something you get to join. And the music has been playing all along. Now, if we're going to play a game that involves good and evil, then you must understand that a game where the good side is obviously dominant, where it wins clearly and completely, isn't a very interesting game. What we really want is a game where it always looks like the good side is about to lose, where it's in genuine, serious danger of collapse. So what's needed, you see, is a system in which the good side is always winning but never actually wins, and the evil side is always losing but never fully loses. That's a wonderfully workable setup for a game that keeps going, that stays engaging, that holds our attention. You can observe this in everyday politics. Every in-group, every circle of good or nice people requires an out-group, a set of bad people, to define itself. Without that contrast, they wouldn't know who they were. So you begin to see this outgroup, this supposed enemy, is necessary. You need him. He keeps you alert. He sharpens your focus. But you mustn't wipe him out. That would be dangerous. Very dangerous. So you must, in a certain way, love your enemies. Not sentimentally, but practically. Recognize them as absolutely necessary elements of the game, and treat them with respect, even with a kind of chivalry. And perhaps if we learn to see things that way, we'll finally be able to handle our technology not with fear or with hostility toward the world, but with love and with care for the environment we are so deeply part of.